Laki, this is a fantastic place. You know, I've heard about Diyabubula for the last 30 years, but I never thought this was anything like this. Can you tell me how you started this?
I happened to come here, not that I really started it. What happened was that my elder brother, who was by way of being a president's counsel,
Nimal, yes.
yeah, well, he had fought some legal action for his first wife's brother-in-law, a rascal, and won him back his many years of, whatever. And that guy offered him this land in lieu of his fee. Right. And he brought him here and with a wave of his hand indicated 195 acres that belongs to someone else. Only these 5 acres belong to him.
Right.
My brother, being a lawyer, said, very good, done deal. And when he came to take possession, he found that he had only these 5 acres. Right. Right about this time, I was now quite fed up of working in some organization where you had to do the work. The last of which was Ena's, which I enjoyed thoroughly. But it's a responsibility. And so I thought, okay, I told him, I'll come and grow the chilies for you. So armed with Nimal Fernando's handbook for the young farmer in hand, since I knew nothing about farming, I came here to start farming.
That was in which year exactly?
In 71.
Right.
So I started doing agriculture and grew chilies and various things. But my brother found that, the expenditure of keeping this thing going and the chilies didn't pay like he expected, he wanted to sell it. So I bought it from him, very cheap, of course, because I'm the brother. And then I had the land and farming going on, but I couldn't afford to pay guys to farm. So there were various guys around with me and what. So I told them, look boys, we'll grow the thing and share it. I can't afford to pay you, but I can afford to give you all to eat and drink in the meantime till we get going. And so it was a commune. This is at the time now inspired by, who? Kurugunawardana, who was now enunciating the Maoist.
Right, of course.
So inspired by all of this, it was then a commune, which worked. We grew things wonderfully well. There were all sorts of squabbles and fights as usual, like in any commune. But then I couldn't sustain it anymore, and then I had to go back to doing art and architecture and all the stuff I had been doing earlier to earn money. So,
no, that's absolutely wonderful, Laki. Yeah. I mean, what is interesting is that, until I came here, I knew you mainly as a fantastic artist, superb sculptor, who I knew had worked with Ena. You also, both of you, very involved in Geoffrey Bawa's work.
Yeah.
So can you tell me about what it was like working with those two, and also some of the projects, that fantastic chandelier in Parliament.
Yeah. The chandelier in Parliament. Now, by this time I had, as it were, gone native according to Geoffrey, who disapproved of all of this.
Right. Of course.
And so I, coming to Colombo, I just dropped in him on the office, and he said, wonderful, Laki, good that you've come. I want a chandelier for the Parliament chamber. And he showed me a section drawing of it. So I said, okay, give me a pen, and immediately drew an idea which I had already been working on, because I was drawing in great detail the double coconut palms in the Peradene Botanical Gardens, which are wonderfully geometric growth patterns. And I immediately drew that and said, that's it. And he said, great.
So that's the explanation of those absolutely wonderful curlicues and all those things.
The unfolding of the giant, the double coconut palm. Incidentally, that sculpture there is a double coconut fruit.
Which is one of those fantastic things which had a strange name. I can't remember what it was.
Well, it's called the Cocodamur.
Right.
And Lodicea something or other, I can't remember botanical name.
Right. But then, there's that sculpture, then your other, well, there are lots of fantastic ones, but I
Yeah.
remember particularly that superb spiraling staircase at the lighthouse. What inspired
Yes.
that?
Well, that's another Geoffrey story.
Right.
Now, many years ago in 1964, I did a drawing. I had a huge sheet of very expensive Botman's paper.
Right.
And I was wondering what on earth to draw. I had a rotring pen in hand, and I was just sort of, making scribble marks on it, which turned out to be like a cloud, a sort of rain cloud. So then I just drew this line of the sea below and a ship, like, old Spanish galleon sort of ships. And then from that it proceeded up the hillside with all sorts of Portuguese soldiers marching up the hillside. And since I like drawing rocks, there was a huge rock like Sigiriya with the king of Gandhi up there,
Right.
and his cohorts coming down with their bows and arrows. And that drawing
Yeah.
I gave to my sister.
Right.
Now Geoffrey coveted this drawing and somehow wanted to wrench it back, and my sister said absolutely no.
Right.
So in the last resort, he was going to England, so I got it from her. He took it to London and got a very good black and white print, so in the 60s,
Right.
from it. So when he wanted this sculpture for the spiral staircase, he suggested that I do this drawing on the wall,
Right.
which is a massive
Yes.
wall.
Yes.
And I said, look, this is going to take at least 6 months of year of drawing, because only I am working.
Yeah.
Instead, let's do this as a sculpture for the balustrade, because then I can get other guys to work.
It's brilliant.
And I said, the drawing will be, because it's a fine drawing, it will be weak
Yeah.
and won't really contribute to the space. So he agreed. Now he had the impression,
Yeah.
this is the height of the balustrade,
Yeah.
and that I'll have a sculpture frieze like running along the top.
Right.
He was pleasantly surprised to find that there were figures bigger than life size.
Right. Going up the whole wall of the staircase. No, it's fantastic.
Took me
It's
6 months of hammering and welding,
Right. But
but
it's
we had great fun.
absolutely brilliant. Then you also said that, when you left in 71 to come here, that you had been working with Ena de Silva. That
Yes.
must have been a fantastic experience as well.
I wouldn't use the word working with Ena de
Right.
Silva. You don't work with her.
Right.
You have adventures.
That's great, yes. Yes. So when did you all start this? Because she had been a wife of an IGP.
Okay, let me tell you how I got. Now, Geoffrey was designing a house for Ena. I was Geoffrey's principal assistant, so I was doing all the drawings. So I met Ena as a client when she had come to discuss, and I was asked to bring the drawings and explain and this and that.
That was in the 50s, was it?
No, it was 60s, 60.
Right.
Maybe 60 or 61.
Right.
However, but then in the evening, I met her again at Cora Abrams' art class, where I was teaching there. And Anil and Kusum, her children, were also in the classes there. So we met again, and right at that time I was demonstrating how to do silk screen printing. So Ena watched this and told me, look, Laki, Anil and I are experimenting in batik. And you're also into fabric. Why don't we, things about this, why don't we put our heads together and have some fun? So I said, by all means, that'd be delightful. And so we started. First of all, we didn't know the first thing about batik. So
Right.
we looked up the Britannica Encyclopedia, which gave you an outline that it was a wax resist form,
Right.
it said. So with that little bit of knowledge, we started using wax on cloth and experimented dyeing with, mercurochrome and quick ink and various things. But finally, Ena got hold of Haley's, someone other's dye thing, who introduced us into dyeing. And major experiments ensued, and we started doing batik in a big way. She had a whole lot of girls working in her courtyard, and we were putting on the pavement sale. Now, just at this time, Geoffrey was in Rome,
Mm.
and I had been wanting to move out from there. So I took the chance and told him, look, I'm sorry, Geoffrey, but when you come back, I won't be working with you anymore because I'm going across to start doing dyeing and batik with Ena.
How did he react? I mean,
Well, he took it well,
Yeah.
you know.
because he loved both of you. I mean, you
Yeah,
were his
yeah.
main collaborators over
Yeah,
the
yeah.
years.
So then I started 10 years of having marvelous adventures with Ena, from butterflies to astronomy to poetry to you name it. The whole company was an excuse for adventure and fun and games.
Because I think I knew you were director, and I think Anil was involved, and
Yeah,
Ena.
and Reggie.
Who was a
Yeah.
poet and literary man.
Reggie was supposed to be our finance minister, knew nothing about finance
Reggie,
whatsoever.
nothing, yes.
But he was there because when we want to find out something about Boolean algebra or whatever, Reggie was the source. He had a library of wonderful books. And he would immediately give us a little discourse on whatever topic that we were
Yeah.
pursuing.
Ena said, you know, he also could, everything was literary oriented, art oriented.
Yeah, yeah,
Must have been a
yeah.
wonderful group.
Oh, we had a wonderful time.
Now, I remember that pavement sale. I was a little boy at the time.
Yeah.
But it was so extraordinary to find a sort of pillar of fashion with these
Don't
two.
ever say that, my dear pillow. You'll have to edit that out if you're ever going to show this to her. Fashion,
Yeah.
style, but not fashion with Ena.
No, I think she'd be cross. I agree. But you know, there were this suddenly turning into creations
Yeah.
and using local people, local designs.
Yeah.
You know, the batiks that she did
Yeah. Yeah.
were indigenous. Your drawings and sculptures were so rooted in this country.
I don't know about that, my dear. I never give it. Neither she or I gave any thought to where the roots of this art were, because we were using wonderful illustrations of Egyptian textiles, and she had a massive book of Indian textiles and I don't know, Burmese, and you know. So there were so many wonderful things, and these all crept into what we were doing. We really didn't think, you know, we must have a root in our country.
Well, I'm not sure. But, you know, your family
Yeah.
was one of the most sort of involved. Your mother, I think, was one of the first female members of parliament from a very left-wing background. Am I right? Florence Senanayake.
Yes. She was member of parliament for Kirialla.
Kirialla, was it? Oh, that's where I have a little cottage now.
Ah.
Beautiful part of the world.
Was
That's her home?
No, it wasn't her home. And she was by no means a politician. What happened was, my father, who was a politician and was being on and off being thrown into prison by the British, the Sama Samaj Party, since he was a heart patient, he told my mother, look, you know, you put your name forward as a candidate. I'll do all the work from the background.
Right.
Now my mother, who sensibly knew that this man with a heart can't sustain a family of 6, she was a superintendent of a coconut estate during the last war, the last stage of the war, and possibly the only woman superintendent of any estate that I know so far.
Was that a family estate, or she was
No,
working
no,
for a
it
company?
was one of Harold Pires' estates. He was a great left-wing sympathizer,
Right.
but rich man.
This is Harold Pires of the Larnell Wen.
That's
Right.
it, okay. So, so my mother said okay, and she closed up the estate.
Right.
And as she was preparing to come, she gets some people turn up to tell her that her husband has just died of a heart attack.
Oh my gosh. Right.
So she was left with this a family of 6, no roof over her head,
Right.
plus a election to fight.
Yeah.
And anyway, she did it. Our house was, you know, it was like a hotel where left-wing intellectuals flowed through. Yeah, I saw a lovely thing in one of these films. Revolution is the opium of the intellectual.
Right. But your father had been a Trotsky.
My father was a planter who, in the late British Raj times, who, according to my mother, when he was a young man, would ride on horseback on the road, and if there were coolies on the road who didn't step into the drain, would lash at them with a whip. Now, this is the story that my mother has said, so I guess there must be some truth in it, you know.
So he was part of the British establishment plus a Trotsky.
But then, I think he got in friendly with Philip Goodwin and NM, and somehow the left-wing intellectual. Maybe he also saw that this was wickedness.
Right. So, but he must have died quite young.
Yeah, he was 49 years when he died. And so he turned court, as it were.
So that was the first time he was going to contest, or had he contested?
Yeah, no, that was the first time he was.
And why Kiriella? Did the family have connections?
No. Sansamad view is that you guys should be able to contest anywhere. Right. You are speaking for the people, and people are everywhere.
So there wasn't the feudal aspect that either SLFP or UNP
No, they just decided you go here. There was some, I guess Philip would have stuck with Borologoda and where he had influence.
Yeah.
But there were areas that no one had influence.
So these people went there.
Yeah.
But before that, they were essentially Colombo based, were they? And
Yeah.
And of course, your brothers and sisters, although radical in their ways, are much more, let us say, established in society. And Nimal was a very famous criminal lawyer, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, more than that, he was, what you call, like Amnesty International. He was fighting civil rights internationally as well.
No, I think
their devotion was for cases, but he was hearing cases of all sorts. And I can write a book about him and the law.
Well, I mean, I remember soon after I came back and began to understand a bit about politics, during the Jayawardena government time, Nimal was one of the few lawyers who stood up against them.
He was the only person who stood up for Mrs. B and for Kumaratunga.
Right.
You know?
Yes. Of course, when Jayawardena jailed Vijay Kumaratunga.
Vijay Kumaratunga and Chandrika, once I had dinner with her on one of the rare occasions, and she knew my brother because he was her lawyer.
Right.
And she was telling me, when Nimal finally got the court to grant him access to consult and see his client Vijay in jail, he comes to her and says, what does Vijay like to drink? Whiskey or brandy? So Chandrika said, are you crazy? You can't take alcohol into the prisons. Yeah, don't talk rubbish, and pulled out one of these slim hip flasks and said, fill it with brandy, and he took the scene. Now here's the President's Council. Can you imagine whatever ensued if they caught him?
Right. Well, I suspect most of the jailers at that time would have been quite sympathetic to Vijay.
No, but that's the sort of thing he did as a lawyer.
But were you also involved in some of the stuff Ena did? I know when I produced that book for her when she was 80.
Yeah.
And I asked you to write.
Yeah.
You said, no, I can't write, but I'll give you a poem.
Yes.
And it was a wonderful poem. But all about the jungles.
When I need to give someone a gift, I think, I need to do something like do a drawing so in most cases, I like you playing around with words, I make up little poems.
Right.
Just funny things. So I now have quite a collection of these, which I'm one of the days going to bring out a little book of what I call involuntary verse.
Other things that struck me about, that poem and so on, I had this impression that part of your work together, as you said, was great fun. Were you ever involved in things like Ham and Hyle?
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Ham and Hyle, Ian and I became the official caretakers of.
Tell me more about Ham and Hyle. I've only been there once.
Herbert Kenneman.
Yes.
Well, Herbert Kenneman had moved to Fort Ham and Hyle, and he was a great friend of Reggie's, which is how we knew him. And then he got a heart attack, so he had to abandon the thing and come inland.
Right.
So he asked us, because this is an archaeological department property, but they call for you know, caretakers who would be responsible for the place. There was a local caretaker there, but you know, someone they could, whatever. However, so we said yes, of course.
It's an old Dutch fort, is
It's
it?
a lovely old Dutch fort, 1.5 miles out in the sea.
Gosh, and how big?
Well, you see this whole space here,
Right.
the walls would have been like that.
So you can walk around it in 20 minutes?
Yeah, there's a, no, in less than 20 minutes. This is ramparts all around, built out of coral, with dungeons and a lighthouse and wonderful place. So then she and I had a great time because, and one of our things is that Jaffna is the best place to look at the stars for astronomy. And Reggie had this 10-inch mirror telescope, which was useless in Colombo. So we moved it to there and would spend our time stargazing.
And Reggie would also come?
Yeah, of course. And you know, that's the only place that I have been able to see the North Star, because the North Star is only 7 degrees above the horizon. But the sea is so humid that usually there's a sort of haze of vapor, so you can't see it. But in Jaffna in January, February, it's so dry and clear that you can clearly see the North Star.
Without the telescoping?
No, with the well, once you see it without the, you don't really need to see it with the telescope. You can see it. The telescope you just see slightly bigger.
Which period was this? Obviously before you left. So
Yeah,
would it have been 60s?
well, I think 67, 68, 67 to... And we bailed out just before the insurgency in 71.
Right. Because I was told that Vijayveera, who led the 71 insurgency, was kept there at one point.
It became a sort of high security prison.
Right.
So we bailed out just in time.
Right.
Wonderful place, we had great adventures. Bird watching, of course. Jaffna is a place. Huh?
Yes.
For
Because of course the
migrants.
Jaffna fort was still there.
Yeah, yes, everything was there.
Right. So that must have been an absolutely great time to stay. Did Ina take her family there as well?
Yes, yes, yes. And you know, not only her family, her pots and pans and all the 5-course meals you would cook.
Yes. Now, of course, Ina during those first years was very much batik.
Yeah.
And then, well, as we know...
But handcraft of all sorts, you know, she was doing elephants and various other stuff.
Even from the start?
Yes, yes. Elephants started pretty much alongside of the batiks.
Right.
Painting, you know, to give these people work. So various other things she started off at the same time, you know, I didn't want all sorts of things.
But of course, as you said, you left them in 71,
Yeah.
and then after her husband
Well,
died...
I left working with Ena in 69, I think.
Right.
But I was still designing for after, a year after I left.
Right.
Because so that they could carry on without too much of a break.
But you do still do as it were, assignments, because I know there was that Syrian castle.
Yeah.
I call it Syrian castle, which Anjalendran, who in a sense was one of Geoffrey's pupils, built in Valigama. And again, you've done a great sculpture there.
Yeah, all over the place.
Right.
You know, the trouble is I have huge sculptures done, but very few people see them, because they are commissioned and then they're taken and installed in someone's sitting room, and after that they've never been on exhibition and really hardly anyone sees them. In the last 5 years I must have made 10 large sculptures and 15 large chandeliers.
And no one knows.
No,
but the horse, you know, as you come into Diyabubula, it's an extraordinary large horse.
Yeah.
Did you do that for
So
someone?
that was a commission for Thirukumar Nadesan's garden.
Where's that?
It's in Nilavali, on the edge of the sea. So I did this as a, to check out, you know, the size, but also because I wanted a horse for myself.
Right.
But this is different. This horse is like, I intended to be wrapped in ficus roots.
Yes.
But unfortunately, Richard, ficus tree won't grow there on its back where there's too much shade. Yeah.
And I must say, your horses, your owls, you particularly like owls, do you?
Yes,
I've seen about
I
6
love them.
here.
I have a pair of resident fish owls about that big. that are here in the evenings
Oh,
mostly.
right.
Yeah.
And they match with the 6 or 7 owl sculptures you have here.
I have photographs of them sitting on these sculptures, you know.
Yes. No, it was lovely just a few minutes ago seeing a kingfisher on your hippopotamus or your pig. I'm not sure whether it's a
Here
pig.
the crocodile now come to bask on this rock down here.
So you've got a crocodile also now.
Yeah. Look down.
You know, you mentioned a couple of people, I think, also had been very involved in this type of approach to nature. Nihal Fernando.
Yeah.
You know, you talked about this handbook for the farmer, which I didn't know.
Yeah, oh, he was my great inspiration, Nihal.
And Nihal also, he's been here presumably.
Yes, many years ago.
Yeah. Because he did a handbook for the Ceylon traveller. That was one of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
earliest natural guidebooks.
Yeah. What was it called?
Handbook for the
Back
Ceylon.
of Beyond.
Really? Right. And Herbert Kenneman?
Herbert Kenneman wrote a huge tome of 700 pages on, you know, the recent history of the island, as it were, and because he had travelled a lot, wonderful person and raconteur. But he never got anyone to print it. So I think Ena de Silva bought the rights to it, but it has never been printed. It's such a thing. I told him,
Still not come out.
I told him, you know, print it in small sections.
Oh, that's a pity.
Yeah.
Okay. One last area to look at, which combines in a sense some of the things we've talked about. You know, you said you came here in 1971. That was just after the insurgency?
Just with the insurgency.
Right. So did you all have political problems here? Because this is quite a poor area, isn't it?
No, we didn't have, I didn't have political problems, but the village 3 kilometers down the road was a hotbed of JVP youth. And so there was a major battle going on between them and police.
So you were here in April 1971?
No, I think I came in just after that.
But there was...
Yeah, I had moved, but I had been, I think, in somewhere else, and I came back just after the thing started.
So many youngsters here took part and died, did
No, not the guys here.
But the village?
Village, God knows what happened there. I hope they didn't. But it was known to be a, you know, JVP area, as they call it, and the police would dash up and down and things like that.
Right, because Dambulla was quite a poor area.
Yes, yeah.
And then what about 18 years later, when the second insurrection happened? Were you still here, or?
Yeah, I was very much here. In fact, set off, this was 83, you know?
No, 83 was the anti-Tamil riots, which I thought hadn't affected people here too much.
No, the Tamils.
No, there were Tamils here.
Of course.
In Dambulla town? And they were attacked?
Yeah.
Right. So did they come here for refuge or anything? Or?
No, they didn't come here, but I guess the poor fellows fled somewhere else.
Right. But I hadn't realized this was
There was
also...
quite a lot of Tamil labour.
Of course, right.
Coming from Kandy, Matale.
Yeah, because Dambulla is part of the hill country, which we forget. I mean, it's a central province.
Yeah.
And Matale is, yes.
Yeah.
So there were big problems. I know Ena's suffered.
Yes, there were problems, except that somehow, because we were known to be a commune, and for quite some time, you know, people come here when they need to get wounds cleaned or whatever. So we were seen as sort of good Samaritans living a quiet life here. So we were not really impinged upon.
And that same thing happened in 88, 89 with the second JVP insurrection.
Yeah.
Because you talked about, you know, some of the village community joining you in both helping with the farming or being part of the cooperative.
Yes. Well, here you don't really get a farming community like a village. There are various people who have come and bought a piece of land and started agriculture. Very few of them have connections to each other family-wise. There are a few that have been here for a long time. But they are also working as, you know, caretakers on most of the things are plantations here, you know. So families that have been here as coconut plantation caretakers and things like that.
No, this is bliss. I have to say, having been here with you, I can quite see why you don't move if you possibly don't have to. Thank you, Laki, very much.